it's a fact, and it's still taught in synagogues, Jewish synagogues to this day by rabbis, the story of a man who has become known as the circle maker. It was the first century BC church, and a devastating drought was taking place, threatening to destroy an entire generation. The generation before Jesus was born, history records. This is not a fairy tale. This is a historical fact, what I'm sharing with you, because they have historians and papers and so on that they have found. The world in that region of the earth, Israel, was in the worst famine it had ever been in, and people were on the verge of dying the generation before Jesus was born. All the prophets, of course, had passed away. There's this dark ages, as it's called in history, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's no word from God. There's no voice from the prophets. There's no one there. The only one that was left was an old sage by the name of Honi. His name was Honi. And he lived outside the gates or the walls of Jerusalem, and he had a relationship with God. He was known as a man of powerful prayer. And in desperation, the leaders of the nation went to this man, Honi. He's a figure in Jewish history that is celebrated to this day. And they asked him, would he please pray, because they realized it was in such a dire situation now that their families were going to die if they didn't get water within a matter of days. And you don't really understand that unless you go to the Middle East, and particularly you go to Israel, and you understand it's a desert, wilderness land, and water, particularly then, not as much now because of amazing inventions, but water then was life. If you could not get water, and the only bit of water they had was the Sea of Galilee that water feeds into, and if there's no water and there's a famine, then people are going to die. And it was that critical. So they go to this old sage, and he says, yes, I will pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for rain. And this is a historical fact. He took his staff, it's about 6 feet long, and he put it in the sand, and he began to turn like a math compass. He began to turn 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, all the way around. A complete circle he made and drew in the sand with the tip of that staff. He drew a circle. He dropped to his knees, and he threw up his hands. And as the hundreds and thousands of people began to gather around, and he's in the middle of that circle, he says these words with his hands raised with great authority. I swear before your great name that I will not move from this circle until you have shown mercy, O God, upon your children. The word sent a shudder down the spine of all of the people who were watching. Amazingly, history records that as that prayer left his lips, instantly and immediately, rain began to descend on the earth. The audible grasp of thousands of people watching could be heard. Every head except Honi's was turned heavenward as rain was parachuting out of the sky and beginning to drop on the people. It was just a very moderate dropping of rain, but people had not seen it in so long that they began to celebrate and shout out loud. But suddenly the voice of Honi pierced through again, and he lifted his voice and prayed a second time. Not for such a rain have I prayed, but for rain that will fill every valley, every cistern, every cavern, O God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And suddenly, according to the witnesses and the documentation of that event, the sprinkle turned into a torrential downpour. No raindrop was smaller than the size of an egg. So great was the downpour of rain that the people began to run toward the Temple Mount to get to the highest place because they knew next would come flash floods. But once again, Honi lifted his voice, still in the circle that he had made, and he prayed one last time, "Not for such a rain have I prayed, but for the rain of your favor, blessing, and graciousness." And just like someone turned the faucet down from a 10 to a 4 or a 5, the rain evened off, and suddenly it was just a beautiful downpour that went for days. The earth soaked the water up, and a generation was saved because one man drew a prayer circle. He became known as the circle maker, and he said, "God, I'm not leaving this circle until you spare my family, you spare my nation, and you spare my generation." It's pretty powerful when you think about it. When you move into the arena of prayer, you need to understand that this story teaches us that bold prayers honor God, and God honors bold prayers. God does not want us to pray weak prayers. God does not want us to pray get-by prayers. God does not want us to ask for things that we think are not that big of a deal. But God likes it when you ask Red Seas to part. God likes it when you ask for axe heads to swim on top of the Jordan River as Elisha did. God likes it when you stand like Joshua and you point to the sun and you say, "Sun, stand still," and God stops the whole universe because someone prayed a bold prayer in faith that was connected to God's purpose and plan in the earth. Prayers are prophecies of your future. And the lack of prayer means that you're not prophesying or receiving any prophecies for your future. The only future that you or your family have are the prayers that you're praying for your marriage, for your children, for your future. And the reason some people don't experience anything different is they don't understand prayer is the prophecy of your future.